Hey, deserving listeners, let's watch.
Friend, limbo, question mark phase. Joey had told me that Madison was coming on to him at bars and was after him. And I obviously was like taken aback. It was uncomfortable for me, and I hadn't seen.
Wait, I think I might have missed something. Now she's accusing Madison?
In a relationship.
Did you progress to being physical in that time you were just?
Couple times, yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Just once.
Well,
Just once.
couple times. And we were in this.
I mean, no, we weren't physical. Just once. Well, it's not, what is it? It's like almost only counts when it comes to horseshoes and grenades. Horseshoes and grenades. You either did it or you didn't. So if you were physical, then it's a yes. Having only been physical once isn't a no. Anyway, so that's suspicious. But anyway, well, a couple of times we were in this friend limo question mark phase. Friend limo question mark phase while they were engaged?
Be friendly, and yeah, I can see now that bothered Monica.
Shortly after the wedding, there was a time where we were hanging out all the time. We were texting all the time. I was helping him finish his apartment. I was going to family functions. Like,
okay, so just to recap, she's saying after the wedding, they were acting like they were in a relationship. So there's a theme here of Devin and Virginia, Ben and Sarah, and Joey and Monica all having aftermath relationships that were not at least seemingly well defined, which I don't know who is, there's 6 people in there and 3 different relationships, but all 6 people could be to blame for not being upfront about defining it, or I don't know. But so we're hearing it's okay to be that way, but you just have to know that if you're not explicit, then the other person could misunderstand or something. So there's a possibility that in this zone that he thought it was okay to start dating other people, or at least to flirt or something, or he's a dirtbag, but let's watch.
Acting like we were in a relationship.
Did you progress to being physical in that time you were just?
Couple times, yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Just once.
Well,
Just once.
Couple times. And we were in this friend limbo question mark.
Okay, and then she says, we had sex a couple times, and we were in this friend limo question mark phase. So she's acknowledging that it was a question mark. Okay.
Phase. Joey had told me that Madison was coming on to him at bars and was.
Okay, so during that friend question mark phase after the wedding, Joey is telling Monica, why are you telling Monica that Madison is hitting on him at bars? And the body language for Madison is a little mysterious, but she's not like, wait, what? So I wonder if there's maybe a little bit of, I'm guessing that there's more to the story. Like Joey was also doing similar things, but why would he be telling Monica? I don't know.
I obviously was like taken aback. It was uncomfortable for me, and I hadn't seen her for a while. And finally, a few months ago, there was a party bus that some of us were on. So I went up to Madison. I'm like, is this true? And Madison said, absolutely not. Like, I did not do that.
Did not do what, Madison?
That.
What did
try to come on?
Okay. I mean, might Joey have misinterpreted? People do that. I'm just trying to figure out why he would even tell Monica. The only thing I could think of is that he was discovered having texted Madison, prior to the wedding, and as a part of their conflict or a part of him trying to justify it, he's just like, look, she was coming on to me after, and I didn't even respond to that. So the fact that I texted her is all innocent. I don't know. It's like, I don't know. I don't know if I'm a huge fan of us hearing them each describe these very disparate stories that are happening after the wedding when they clearly did not want to get married and they, I guess if you're going to talk about drama, then this is where it lies, right? Because clearly nothing happened overtly before the wedding, so I guess you have to talk about stuff that happened off camera.
Okay.
My jaw was on the floor. Like,
Hello?
Okay, so
I'm not,
But you've seen
not done yet.
Joey out in bars, but you're saying it never escalated to you coming on to Joey.
No, literally,
No.
we dated, yes, but I always felt very platonic towards Joey.
Wait, you dated like in the pods, or
in
you
the
dated in
pods,
real life?
In the pods, sorry.
Okay. So she's refuting that. Yeah. Okay. All right. I don't know if it matters. I mean, if he is mistaken, okay, or if he's even halfway right and Madison doesn't remember that or didn't see it that way or doesn't want to admit, it doesn't really matter because they were in the friend limbo time. Friend limbo time means they weren't together, right? Or at least it wasn't clear. They're in friend limbo time and they're still involved to some extent, but they're in friend limbo time. And at the very least, it's viable that Joey and Madison could have thought that Monica and Joey were not exclusive. So whether or not Madison was flirting or not, it's all in that zone, as far as I can tell. Now, I guess the one thing we can potentially ask ourselves is if Joey just likes to make shit up or has a distortion around that sort of thing. And if true, then why would he even tell Monica about that? I don't know. There's just a lot of questions.
She did, but I was appalled by that. Like, it was just this crazy lie. And so we both pull him aside and we're like, what is that about?
And he says, Monica, I didn't say that. And I'm like, Joey, you did tell me that. So now I'm feeling gaslit, like I made it up, why would I even make that up?
Okay, ignoring the gaslight word, which, you could potentially stretch the definition to that, which, I'm not going to argue with right now. I'm just trying to figure out what would be Joey's motivation. Why would he tell Monica that Madison was all over him? Why, if it was a lie, why? If it was halfway true, because I could see, I was talking earlier about how he might have misinterpreted something, which happens. No harm, no foul there, really. But why tell Monica? And if that's true, then I could see him being confronted and saying like, oh God, I don't want to get into this. I didn't say that. And then if that's true, why not just admit it and say, okay, well, yeah, well, okay, so Madison, you didn't see it that way. Okay. So I think there's a high likelihood that Joey is immature because this is some high school shit right now. I don't know. I'm hearing 3 different accounts, so it's hard to tell, but I'm wondering if for Joey, he was bragging in a weird way about something. I'm just really wondering about the context as why you would tell Monica that Madison was all over you. So I suspect that there was a friendly conversation between Madison and Joey interpreted it in a way that was in the direction of Madison is into me. It would not be the first time that someone was distorted about that, particularly men, by the way. This is just anecdotal, but a lot of dudes that I know and I've seen and have heard about will have a lot of hopeful thinking when it comes to, oh, she smiled at me. That means she loves me. So now I'm going to be forward with her. And she's just like, what happened? And he's like, well, you smiled at me. So that means that you want to have sex in the closet, right? And that happens all the time. I'm exaggerating, but that exaggeration does happen and more. So I don't know. I'm completely making shit up right now about what actually happened. But if I just try to imagine what story would so I'll tell you, when I hear things from clients, whether it's an individual or couples or families, when I hear a lot of information, it is sometimes useful for me to try on different hypotheses, different scenarios that I would have observed from the outside that would explain the very different accounts. And it does help because without that, it can be very confusing, at the very least, to just listen and be like, what am I hearing? But it also can have a lot of ramifications for treatment. Like I won't even know where to begin if I don't have an idea of what actually happened. Now, sometimes I will imagine what happened to be very much in line with what one person's account is, and the other person is distorted or lying or something. So I'm not always like meeting in the middle. By no means am I doing that. But I do find it interesting helpful for the sake of treatment to try on different scenarios, and you'll see me do that often. Okay. And I'm doing it right now. So I'm trying to do that right now there's a world in which Joey liked Madison. And prior to the wedding, at some point he in his head had broken up with Monica and was thinking, well, maybe something will happen with me and Madison. Maybe he was thinking about a lot of other people. That wouldn't be uncommon. And he's a child, so he can't manage the maturity and the steps. And he has a hard time understanding how it's going to affect other people. And so a child, meaning that he just has not grown up. How old is he? He's 34. My goodness. Well, that doesn't mean, having his demeanor is not one of a 34-year-old, right? So let's see. Best friends with his sisters, works with his dad. One sister died when he was 16. His mom is naive and terrible with money, he said. Homeschooled, then went to public school. Football saved him, he said. He got a scholarship, blah, blah, blah. He stayed home. Oh, he couldn't take the scholarship to play football because he stayed home. As a young man, he worked hard to become financially independent because he knew he couldn't depend on his parents. So yeah, there's nothing really there to grab onto, but he definitely gives off a youthful, carefree energy, maybe a mindset or an approach of more self-centered, not narcissistic, but more self-centered, like the way a child would be. And sometimes when people have that personality, the trauma, so to speak, is that they were not allowed to grow. They were not allowed to be a kid. And so I'm now revisiting. He wanted to be a kid, or he wanted to be an 18-year-old and pursue his dream of playing football on a scholarship, which is a big deal. Even at small colleges, like, that's a big deal. And it's such an accomplishment. You have to work really hard for that. And he gets a scholarship, but he couldn't, or he had scholarship offers. And who knows what that means? It could have been like 10% of his tuition, or it could be full ride. It depends. But he wanted to go, but he couldn't because he also wanted to stay home and help his mom and his younger sister. And he talked about how I'm so glad I took notes on this because I kind of forgot. He said his mom was naive and terrible with money. So he was parentified. And his parents were divorced by then. And he said, quote, that was really tough time for him. This doesn't justify anything, but it is something to think about. And you might be someone like this, or you might know someone like this. As a young man, he worked hard to become financially independent because he knew he couldn't depend on his parents. It's hard to know what that means, but when we take it all in at once, that is very much an indication of at least some parentification, if not a lot. And it's possible that he's even leaving out a lot of elements. His mom being naive and terrible with money. It would be weird if she was only incompetent in that way, only not, because the extension of that is that she did not provide safety for the family, and he had to. And maybe it was generalized to her personality. Who knows? But that the mom, not only with money, because that's the more concrete thing you can point at, like, Mom, the electricity, what's going on? Oh, well, I didn't pay the bill. What? And that's just the most concrete outcome of a general personality, depression, something. And overall, throughout his childhood, she would drop the ball in a lot of ways, a lot more subtle ways. Who knows? I don't want to throw the mom under the bus. But at the very least, we're hearing pretty strong indications of parentification. I mean, just the fact that he had to sacrifice his dreams to stay home to help his mom and his younger sister. I mean, it's not horrible to do that. Sometimes that's the way to go. And in other cultures, other than mainstream American culture, that's the standard, right? But he talks about that being a very tough time. Anyway, so when you have parentification, you develop a schema of I am responsible, and you have this, I'm responsible for everything. And so you have this dichotomy inside of you of like the superego that is saying, You have to be responsible. You have to be on the ball, and you have to extend yourself into the future in terms of your responsibility and your being buttoned up, doing the right thing. Don't go out with your friends and have beers. You got to stay home and study. You got to make sure that you squirrel money away. You got to pay those bills. You got to watch out for these other bills that your mom can't pay. And there's another part of the individual that is just like, but hey, what about me? What about me? And if you were to parentified, you know this feeling. There's a lot of anger and there's a lot of resentment, and also a lot of hatred about that part of you, because you don't want that part of you. That's interfering. The youth you, is bothersome. Okay, so you have to, as you grow and you move beyond that scenario, you retain that, and you have to have some way of coping with it. And according to the model of schema therapy, there are three umbrella styles, three main categories of styles of coping. One is to surrender to the notion that you're just in charge and you are never going to be allowed to be yourself. You're never allowed to be a youth or to have those kinds of things. And what'll happen to parentified people is whatever was left on the table undone at certain ages will be fixed in time. So you can be 50 years old, and if you were parentified and you were denied the opportunity to be an 18-year-old, you have a strong 18-year-old voice inside of you, an urge to be 18. It's not just to be self-centered or to be interested in your own needs. It's the 18-year-old version of that, which can be very disruptive, right? To act like you're 18 when you're 50 anyway, or when you're 37, 34 is how old he is. So you can surrender to it and say, okay, fine, I'm responsible. That's not a good answer, but it is an answer. It's a way to cope with it. Another is to avoid. And one version of that would be you would avoid any scenario that would call into question whether or not you were responsible. So you might avoid relationships, avoid difficult jobs, avoid picking up the phone when your mom calls, that kind of thing. There's various different definitions of that. The other one is to overcompensate. And to overcompensate would be to, there's a number of different ways to do that. One is to be codependent and control another person because you're competent. You sort of extend that relationship with your mom, because you could say that there's possibilities that the mom was underfunctioning and you just find another underfunctioner, or maybe even just stick with your mom. But another version of the overfunctioning is to overshoot it and be irresponsible, to allow yourself to be 18. And it can feel like a pushback, right? Like, screw you, I'm not going to be responsible. I've had way too much of that shit. And even the superego in my mind, I'm going to push back against that, normal impulses of like, hey, you need to think about this for your own sake. Don't, it's not even for your mom. This is for you. Like, don't text Madison. This is not going to help you. And then immediately there's this overreaction of like, screw you. I've dealt enough with responsibility. I always do the right thing. This is what I want. So you can imagine that, right? You can imagine this impulse, which would be fine. The body wants what it wants. It's just like, okay, I think Madison is hot. And I saw her at the thing and we had a connection. I want that. And then immediately there's some voice of just like, but what about Monica? What about your responsibility? What about doing the right thing? And without even thinking about it, without really walking through it, there's this immediate pushback of just like, no, I have sacrificed so much and I've never been apologized to and I've never been given any kind of commendation. My mom has never thanked me for sacrificing, and it still burns me. But I can't think about that because that would ruin my relationship with my mom. So I stuff it, and it comes out when the superego kicks in. No, and this happens a lot. This is a syndrome. It's not in the DSM, but it happens a lot and causes a lot of problems and shoots this individual in the foot, the Joeys. They're frequently shooting themselves in the foot, and they don't know why. And the problem is that what it induces in others is the exact same dynamic that they originally were traumatized by, where everyone is looking at the Joeys and saying, you need to be more responsible. You are childish. You're immature. You are screwing things up, which is exactly what was happening when he was 18. And he was just being an 18-year-old. And he was being yelled at. And he'll interpret it the same way. There it goes again. Everyone getting on my back for things that I don't deserve. And, I just wanted to do it. And it's not that big of a deal. And he might naturally be golden retriever-like, or it's this gravitational shift for him to be that way because he is giving a signal to people that he can't be depended on, that he is a child. Does this make sense?
This was a conversation we had, and I said, I have
Why
no
would
interest.
she be worried about that if you didn't make her feel worried for no reason?
Again, I said, I have no interest. And I said, and that is
giving
why
interest.
I told anything that came up at the bar to Monica, because I respected Monica's and I's relationship. And I wanted to keep our relationship a priority.
Yeah, I think my original hypothesis as to the context is possibly what happened, that he either disclosed or was discovered or worried that it would come out that he was texting with Monica or Madison and others while he was engaged to Monica, and while they were after the wedding, after Monica said no, and they're in this friend-like place, which then you wonder, what are you doing, Joey? Why are you extending it when it very much looked like a long time before the wedding you were done? Why wouldn't you just say, okay, he said no. Well, I forgive you for saying no at the altar. Sorry for all my things, and let's hug and let's do a clean cut, and we'll be friends. And because they're talking about like living or doing kind of couple like things anyway. Or I don't know, maybe from his perspective, he's like, well, we're friends, and I still want to see her. I don't want to just anyway, I don't know. But it sounds like at some point the topic of Madison came up, and he, in his way of trying to defend himself, said, she was all over me and I didn't get together with her. That's how much I don't like her. You know what I mean? Which, could be true. And then when he's confronted about it, he's just like, oh no, shit. Now or he's thinking, well, Madison was not like all over me, but she did. It felt flirty, but I don't know. And I don't want to get into it. But he has no way of describing it, and he's just a doofus. The whole thing, Or another scenario, I think what Madison believes is that he was trying to get with Madison, but why would he tell Monica? That's what's so weird. If he was a dirtbag, or he's such a dirtbag that he can't help himself but to say like, look, Monica, Madison's all over me. So what? I'm a catch or what? I don't know. That's confusing.
Not Madison's and I's. So
We didn't have a relationship, Joey.
right.
She does bring up an interesting point. I'm not saying it's right, but why was the name Madison even on Monica?
Another great question. This is exactly what should be asked. Like, what was the context for Madison's name to come up in the first place?
Monica's radar had it not come up in a
I don't know.
conversation?
Because it wasn't.
It was.
It wasn't at all. So when Joey said, oh, Madison's coming on to me. I
Right,
was
so
like,
he
whoa.
brought it up. And
Yes.
you're saying you never brought it up.
She brought it up that she was worried as well.
No, Joey, because I confronted you about this later. I said, how did Monica happen to think that? How did she come to that? Because you and I don't talk.
So I suspect that each of them has a different memory of an actual event, and there's truth to both of their memories. And he is claiming that that Monica brought up Madison, and Madison is claiming that Joey brought up Madison. But I think I'm just going to take a guess and say that Joey brought it up because he thought that Monica would find out about him texting Madison. So another possibility is that Joey was still kind of into Monica, and Monica and Joey were having conversations, in the week after the wedding. And Monica is just like, I don't think that you really love me. I don't think you're into me. And he might, again, just making shit up, but he might have said something like, no, I'm into you. In fact, or she even accused him, generally speaking, of just like, you're just waiting to get rid of me so you can date someone else, or I don't know, something in that category. And he's like, no. In fact, Madison was all over me, and I didn't respond to that. So I'm guessing it was something like that. Yeah.
Don't hang out.
No.
I see you at group settings. That's it. Like, how could she possibly come to that conclusion? And you said maybe it was a joke.
And I did see that. I was there for that part, so.
All I know is my truth. That's it. I know that I felt let on. I did not feel loved. I was really trying, and I don't think that effort was reciprocated.
Yeah. That, I think, is factual. And I don't know if Joey, well, right. Joey's claim is that the sister ruined it, which is not likely. But yeah. So her returning to the facts and what she knows, because, these other things like, well, what's going on? So yeah, I think it's good that she's doing it. It's like, well, if we get rid of the riffraff, what I know is that now I think she's generalizing it to the whole relationship, which is potentially not the case. But in the last few weeks, I don't know when that transition was, it did very much even look that way from the edit. So yeah. And, I say all this not to defend him. I don't give a shit. Mostly I care about Monica and the Monicas of the world, that when you walk away assuming something without strong data, that he never loved me, then it is inherently traumatized. That's a trauma. You were psychopathically manipulated. That happens sometimes. Take it from me. Meaning that I've treated people like this. It's horrible, but it's very rare. It's much more likely that they did love you and fell out of love with you at some point and did not tell you or didn't want to admit it to themselves or something. Because we don't have a protocol in our culture that allows for people to say something. Like imagine if we lived on an alien planet, and I know that actually some pagan, Wiccan groups will do versions of this, like recommitment ceremonies every year or something. I don't know if that's true, but I've heard. But it's not exactly like this. But imagine if on an alien planet that there was this ceremony where you were allowed to say yay or nay or maybe, and all was okay. There might be pain, but no one was going to accuse you or blame you. And you were allowed to think, that you were given the space to think about it, to talk about it, get support around it, and declare it to your partner, maybe even in front of other people. I don't know. And that was all allowed. We don't have that. There's nothing like that. If you get engaged to someone, it's assumed that you're in it to win it, and it'll never change because that's what the rom-coms say. And if you do fall out of love, then you're a dirtbag. You're a jerk face when it's like it happens. It happens to the best of people, to the best of relationships. And I think it's threatening to everyone to imagine that, because you imagine that your spouse will suddenly fall out of love with you, right? It's not pleasant to think about that possibility, but it does happen. It happens a lot for various reasons. So I say all this because for the Monicas of the world to walk away concluding that I was love bombed, that he was tricking me, that he never loved me, which again is possible. I think particularly on this show because it's so brief and it's Love is Blind, and it's, there's some amount of internet clout that people are thirsty for. But anyway, but I still would imagine that the rate would be far lower for someone to, from the beginning, knowingly not be in love at all than otherwise. So whereas if you have a narrative, even without hearing from Joey, because he's not helping, that it was real in the beginning, and it was real for both people. And at some point, prior to you realizing it, he had fallen out of love with you. And there was a period of time that you sort of cringe at, but you don't really blame yourself, where you were like all over him and he had already basically decided he didn't want to be with you. That was a period of time. And he was too afraid or too immature or in denial or unsure or something to inform you. And that's a very different, that story, because that's more likely the story in situations like this, I don't know about them, is far less, in fact, that story is not traumatizing. The only time that you would have some questions about is that period of time when they fell out of love with you and either didn't know themselves or didn't tell you. And for them, I imagine that was 3 or 4 weeks or something. And during that time, that could be very concerning, could be very hurtful, could be traumatizing. I was potentially being lied to during that time, or because the trauma thing has to do with like informing how we react in the future. That's what our brains are trying to do. It's trying to say, remember this, and pay attention and assume X, Y, and Z because you didn't last time. So what are we invited to assume by the universe? Are we invited to assume that the next time someone expresses love, that there's a really good likelihood that they actually don't love me? Okay? You imagine that would not be a good conclusion for Monica. And looking at her notes, she's like, in the past, nothing has worked out. It's exhausting to start over and over again, she said. In college, she was seriously dating a guy and he went on vacation and suddenly broke up without explanation. So I don't know what happened in her past, but if she continues to have these experiences and interprets it, in a very sure way, in a certain narrative, how would she ever trust again? So if it's a different narrative, though, there is something to pay attention to in the future. Like, if I'm in love and if I am told that someone loves me, there's a good chance that they do it, especially if I feel it, right? In the beginning, I felt it and I was hearing it. I didn't hear the word love, but I heard affirmation of I want to be with you, I want to marry you, that kind of stuff. And I felt it, in the pods and right after the pods, I felt it and I heard it. But later on, I basically heard it because he stayed engaged to me, but I didn't feel it. So that's the X, Y, and Z that I need to watch out for. Not that someone said that they loved me or indicated that they wanted to be with me. When I felt it and heard it, I want to learn from that. That was real. But when I kind of heard it but didn't feel it, that's what I need to watch out for in the future. That's what I need to pay attention to. That's the trauma or the lesson. That's the narrative. That's what I'm talking. When I'm not defending him. He'll be fine. Doesn't really matter, but I'm so worried about Monica. I forgot. I'm so glad I took the notes. I forgot that she came into this scenario already with that schema. And this would be a nail in the coffin because it's so definitive and it's so easy to get into that narrative, particularly, I guess, with the Madison stuff. And if you're a friend of Monica, if you're Madison and you're Molly, because they were supportive, and you just go along with that narrative without really knowing, you are not helping Monica. And, Monica, whatever. I'm talking to you and your friends and your life and your traumas. And if you're a Joey in the world, try to tell the Monicas, by the way, I want to be clear. I was into you in the beginning. It was real for me. I was desperate to be with you. And I don't know what happened, but at some point it just went away. And I have no explanation for it. I originally thought it was your sister, but it couldn't have been that. And I just don't know. And I've given a lot of thought. I just can't tell. But it just went away. And maybe that's something wrong with me. I don't know. But I definitely felt it in the beginning. And and you felt it too. I felt it from you and I felt it in me. And maybe the Monicas of the world won't believe you, but give it a try. Put it out there, give them a chance. Because So many people are walking around narrativizing situations like this in the negative, and they're forever angry and hurt and alone. I mean, we know that happens, right?
I think you're an amazing son, you're an amazing brother, and you're a great friend, but like, as a romantic partner, like, you do have a lot more to learn. I'm sure I do too, but like, you were not a good romantic partner to me. I'm so ready just to shut the door, and we are humans on this earth together.
Yeah.
There you go.
And that is okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah. So she concludes with, look, this is the truth. And she brings it back to what she knows. And then she's like, I know that you're a good person, which is a good thing to say on camera, because the audience will be protective of Monica, and you wouldn't want to unfairly, sick the entire audience on someone. So 2 thumbs up to that. All right, well, that is it for that episode. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.